The iconic white sails of the Sydney Opera House shatter under the pressure of a massive black wall of water, standing dozens of meters high. Concrete debris, glass, and steel explode into the air, mixing with white sea foam as the magnificent architecture collapses completely into the ocean. The majestic Sydney Harbour Bridge groans under terrible pressure, twisting violently before snapping in half right in midair. Hundreds of commuting cars fall freely into the swirling vortex below, vanishing instantly into the dark, watery abyss. The tsunami rushes through the central business district, smashing into skyscrapers with the destructive power of a nuclear bomb. Office windows on the 20th floor shatter inward, turning modern workspaces into deadly aquariums filled with floating debris. A massive cruise ship is lifted by the surge, drifting uncontrollably between the narrow streets of the city. The steel hull of the ship crashes into a luxury hotel, tearing through the structure like a thin piece of paper. From above, the city of Sydney looks like a toy model being drowned by a cruel and angry ocean. When the ocean decides to reclaim its territory, human modern technology becomes utterly useless against its raw power. A traffic light flickers green one last time before being submerged by the murky water filled with vehicle debris. A Caucasian man with blue eyes stares in frozen horror as the shadow of the wave eclipses the sun. The 80-meter-tall water wall towers over the skyline, dwarfing the tallest buildings in the city. This is not a scene from a science fiction movie, but a chillingly realistic simulation of a disaster. Deep beneath the Tasman Sea, geological faults are shifting, releasing energy equivalent to thousands of nuclear warheads. A massive underwater landslide pushes billions of tons of water towards the Australian coast, while the people remain unaware. The shockwave travels at the speed of a jet plane, leaving the population with only a few short minutes to escape. Will Sydney survive this watery apocalypse? Or will it become a modern-day Atlantis in 15 minutes? The famous Sydney Harbour Bridge disappears completely under the foaming waves as the screen slowly fades to black. Welcome to the end of days, where we witness the terrifying and unstoppable power of a global catastrophe. Sydney, January 20th, 2025, a brilliant summer morning with a clear blue sky free of any dark clouds. At Circular Quay, the urban rhythm remains as frantic as ever, with yellow ferries cutting across the glistening water. However, 2,000 kilometers to the southeast, a geological nightmare has just awakened deep beneath the ocean floor. Flocks of seagulls suddenly fly frantically inland, their ear-piercing cries tearing through the quiet atmosphere. At Bondi Beach, the ocean water begins to recede strangely, revealing coral reefs never seen before. Instead of fleeing, curious tourists walk down onto the wet sand to look at the fish flopping helplessly. The Sydney sky suddenly turns from bright blue to a heavy leaden gray, the air becoming terrifyingly still. The tsunami warning system begins to wail its mournful sirens, but chaos has already blocked every escape route. From the horizon, a white line begins to appear and grow larger, swallowing the boundary between sea and sky. Thousands of people on the beach stand frozen in horror as they realize the deadly wall of water is rushing in. As the massive energy collides with the shallow continental shelf, the wave rears up violently like a striking cobra. The speed decreases, but the height skyrockets, reaching 80 meters, completely obscuring the entire eastern sky. The black wall of water slams into the sandstone cliffs of Bondi, creating a terrifying hydraulic explosion that shakes the earth. Million-dollar coastal homes are instantly pulverized, turning into piles of rubble in a mere fraction of a second. An entire bustling residential neighborhood is wiped off the map, swept away by the unstoppable and aggressive current. The frantic water channels into Sydney Harbour through the narrow gap between cliffs, compressed and increasing to maximum pressure. A yellow ferry attempts to turn around and flee, but is quickly swallowed by the violent wave approaching from behind. The tsunami advances deep into the harbour, heading straight towards the most famous architectural icons of Australia. The Sydney Opera House stands there, fragile and tiny before the massive black wall of water rushing closer. Darkness envelops the white sails as the wave eclipses the sun, signaling that the final moment has arrived. The first impact shakes the foundation, the sound of cracking concrete ringing out like continuous cannon fire. The famous shell-shaped roofs shatter in large chunks, the internal steel frames buckling and snapping. Tons of tempered glass from the main foyer explode, sending millions of shards shooting inside like a rain of sharp knives. Water floods into the luxurious auditorium, submerging the rows of red velvet seats in mud and salty seawater. In just a few minutes, the cultural icon of humanity has completely disappeared beneath the chaotic layer of white foam. Not far away, the Sydney Harbour Bridge is enduring unprecedented pressure from the record-breaking rising water. Cars trapped on the bridge are shaken violently by wind and water, passengers screaming in desperation. The water rises to touch the bridge deck, turning the vital artery into a raging river in midair. Massive steel rivets begin to pop out, shooting away like bullets as the structure overloads. The magnificent steel bridge groans, emitting ear-piercing metallic sounds before twisting into a deformed shape. At the weakest point, the metal tears apart, and the bridge snaps in half, falling freely into the swirling abyss below. The impact of the bridge hitting the water creates a massive column of water shooting hundreds of meters into the sky. The destructive current continues to rush straight into the city center, where skyscrapers stand silent and motionless. At Circular Quay, water overflows the ferry wharves, sweeping away ticket booths and souvenir shops along the waterfront. The subway station turns into a giant drain, with water pouring down the escalators like a majestic waterfall. Underground, tunnels flood in an instant, submerging trains lying silent in the darkness. Above ground, the water rises to the 10th floor of buildings, the water pressure shattering rows of office windows. Office workers see printers and computers floating aimlessly past the windows of the 15th floor. The current creates powerful whirlpools between buildings, crushing everything that collides together. An old brick building cannot withstand the pressure, collapsing slowly into the fast-flowing current. More modern buildings sway like trees in the wind, their steel structures groaning under the impact of the flood. Double-decker buses are swept away like matchboxes, smashing into street light poles. A massive neon billboard short circuits, exploding sparks violently down onto the dark water. The Sydney Tower Eye stands desolate amidst the sea of water, like a lonely lighthouse in a chaotic ocean. The beautiful Royal Botanic Garden is now just a muddy swamp with uprooted ancient trees. Stone statues in the park are rolled away by the water, smashing into small fragments upon impact. A luxury yacht lies precariously on the roof of a 3-story building after the wave has passed. Rain begins to pour down in torrents, mixing with the seawater to create a bleak and desperate scene. Debris from the city forms a floating island of trash, drifting aimlessly in the current. No more roads, no more sidewalks. Sydney is now a network of deadly rivers. The sound of rescue helicopters rings out, but is tiny and helpless against the roar of the ocean. Survivors cling to the highest billboards, soaked and shivering in the cold wind. A whirlpool sucks a delivery truck down to the depths, air bubbles bubbling up violently. The glass panels of the skyscrapers reflect the image of destruction, doubling the horror. Columns of black smoke rise from chemical fires floating on the water, creating a hellish scene. Water begins to breach the gold and currency vaults of the central banks. A shark swims lost into the flooded lobby of a 5-star hotel. The view from above shows Sydney like an open wound bleeding with water and mud. The air is thick with the smell of gasoline, seawater, and the scent of death. Chaos reaches its peak as nature completes its restructuring of the city's geography. Humans become absolutely insignificant, no longer the masters of this planet. This is a brutal testament to the uncontrollable power of Mother Nature. Iconic buildings that were once a source of pride are now just bare concrete skeletons. The roar of the water is gradually replaced by the sound of wind whistling through broken windows. The sun begins to set, casting blood-red rays onto the dead city. Darkness gradually swallows what remains of a brilliant civilization. Sydney has fallen, completely and absolutely, before the wrath of the ocean. As water penetrates underground substations, the entire power grid of Sydney begins a cascading collapse. Massive electric sparks dance on the dark water, creating invisible death traps for those swimming. City lights extinguish district by district, running from the harbor inland, leaving an artificial night in broad daylight. Major hospitals go on red alert as backup generators are flooded and fail to start. Underground gas pipelines are snapped by water pressure, leaking millions of cubic meters of flammable gas to the surface. A stray spark accidentally ignites the gas, triggering massive pillars of fire erupting from the water like volcanoes. Sydney turns into a surreal hell. Fire burns fiercely on the sea, black smoke mingling with salty steam. The transport system is completely paralyzed, with thousands of cars forming massive debris dams at intersections. Sydney Kingsford Smith Airport turns into a vast lake, with jetliners drifting like plastic toys. In skyscrapers, elevators stop working, trapping thousands of people in metal boxes suspended in midair. Panic-stricken crowds trample each other in the narrow and dark emergency stairwells. The telecommunications network crashes, mobile phones becoming useless bricks, cutting off all communication. People on rooftops wave shirts and flags desperately to attract the attention of rescue helicopters. But the helicopters cannot land because the winds are too strong and there are no safe landing spots. In the Blue Mountains area, tens of thousands of evacuees cause unprecedented, horrific traffic congestion. Food and clean water become instantly scarce. Supermarkets looted clean within an hour. Survivors begin to fight each other for every bottle of mineral water floating on the floodwaters. Sewage water mixed with toxic chemicals spills onto the streets, threatening an immediate outbreak of disease. An Asian woman hugs her pet dog tightly, huddled on the roof of a flooded bus stop. A Caucasian man tries to use a wooden door as a raft to move his family to safety. Darkness falls quickly, temperatures drop deep, causing soaked people to start suffering from hypothermia. Only the light from chemical fires illuminates the bewildered, desperate faces. The distant sirens mix with the crying of children to create a tragic symphony. Looters begin to take advantage of the darkness to smash up jewelry and electronics stores. Police and military are helpless, unable to access isolated areas to maintain order. An ambulance floats freely, lights still spinning, but inside it is empty and cold. Wild animals escape from Taronga Zoo, wandering amidst the ruins of the city. A crocodile crawls up the steps of the state library, seeking dry shelter. Precious books, hundreds of years old, float aimlessly, ink blurring in the salty water. The city's drainage system has failed completely, turning Sydney into a giant sewage reservoir. Broken glass buildings create a greenhouse effect, trapping heat from the fires, making the air stifling. A group of people try to break into a pharmacy to find antibiotics and bandages. No more law, only the law of survival. The strong eat the weak in the fight for life. The elderly and weak are left behind, sitting quietly awaiting their fate. A police car is flipped upside down, wheels still spinning in the air, siren wailing weakly. The water begins to recede slowly, leaving a thick layer of mud sticking to everything like glue. Luxury cars are now just rusting hunks of scrap metal lying haphazardly on the streets. The stench from animal carcasses and garbage begins to rise pungently as the water recedes. A child finds their doll half buried in the mud, the doll's face smeared with dirt. The walls of the buildings bear a dark watermark, marking the highest level the disaster reached. Pedestrian bridges are smashed, steel frames twisted like grotesque abstract sculptures. The elevated train system is severed, tracks pointing straight into the void. Once vibrant billboards now lie shattered under the mud. LED lights dead. A large cargo ship is stranded right in the middle of the Central Park, creating an absurd scene. Dark night covers completely. Sydney has no electric lights, only cold moonlight illuminating the rubble. The cries for help fade away, giving way to the heavy silence of death. People huddle together around small fires, eyes staring blankly into the darkness. A man paints a giant help on the rooftop with white paint, hoping satellites will see. This is the longest night in Australia's history. The night civilization stepped back centuries. Dawn will come, but it will shine on a completely different world, a world that has been destroyed. Desperate survival efforts are just beginning in a city devoid of life. Humans must now learn to live with loss and indelible pain. Mother Nature has demonstrated her power, and humanity has paid too high a price. The sun rises weakly after the storm, casting a gray light onto a dead and silent city. The ruins of the Sydney Harbour Bridge stand tall, like the forgotten skeleton of a giant dinosaur. Where the vibrant opera house once stood, only a bare concrete platform remains amidst the murky water. Survivors step out from the shadows, gazing down in disbelief at the hellscape spread out before them. In the deadly silence, people begin to dig through the thick mud to search for their loved ones. Military boats begin to navigate through the flooded avenues, carrying a fragile glimmer of hope. This disaster is a brutal reminder that modern cities are merely sandcastles to the ocean. We never control nature. We only exist by its temporary and fragile mercy. Sydney will be rebuilt from the ashes, but the scar of this day will remain indelible forever. The ocean retreats to the depths, but its terrifying warning will echo eternally in the silence.